All right, what is going on, fellas? You guys are joining me here for a not particularly exciting session, admittedly, but the road to an 80 pound deadlift is coming soon, 400 kilos. We're beginning that quest here pretty soon. Back is just about healed up, work capacity is being built up, so we should begin that journey here pretty soon. Just to check off another one of my big static strength goals. Obviously, the first one was that road to a 600 bench press series I did. That was pretty meaningful to me. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still pretty stoked about how well that went. But I think the 880 deadlift, the 400 kilo deadlift, would mean more to me, considering I'm built pretty well to bench press. I'm built pretty poorly to deadlift. So I feel like it would be a real testament to being a pretty well rounded strength athlete and having good, well rounded static strength to have achieved both of those. So probably would mean a little bit extra to me. I'm going to be leveraging my training to bias towards the deadlift, but I'm not going to be specializing into it quite as much as I did on the bench press because I got a lot of other things to work on. I definitely need to start competing a bit more often in strongman to continue gaining competitive experience. So in addition to competing more often, I also have to work on the facets of being a well-rounded strongman. So you've got your static strength side of things, which these couple of static strength goals I've got in my head to feel like I've reached truly world class. Because I think some people would argue maybe I'm already there, but in my own perception, the only one I've done is truly that bench press. So maybe after we do that 400 kilo deadlift, we'll be looking at a big squat, maybe a big overhead with leg drive, maybe a big strict press, something like that. Just check off some more static goals. But in addition to being statically strong, to be decent at my sport, you got to have good grip, you got to have good moving events, you got to have good loading events, and good explosive strength, which brings me to this workout here. So during this deadlift training, we're still going to be working on our pressing with leg drive, still working quite hard on that. During our deadlift training, we're still going to be squatting, which to be fair, even if I was specializing pretty heavily into the deadlift, I would still prioritize squatting because when my squat is strong, my deadlift tends to follow suit so long as I'm doing all the other things I know I need to do to build up my deadlift. So if I focus truly on specializing into the squat, the deadlift doesn't go too good. But if my squat is strong and I'm also doing my RDLs, I'm doing my rowing, the deadlift tends to be quite strong as well. So when those other boxes are checked as well, the squat tends to do my deadlift a lot of good. So we'll be working on that regardless, working on the upper body pulling strength because that helps the deadlift. But we're also going to be working on the moving events, the loading events, and the grip. Here today, this was actually supposed to be a moving event to start the session, but we had like a little bit of a dust storm going on outside that I didn't really feel like going out in and doing my carries. So I figured I would warm up with some light power snatches. Nothing heavy, just pretending like I know what I'm doing. Worked up to 155. A friend of mine said he would be very impressed if with minimal training, I got my way up to 120 kilos, so a 265 power snatch. So I guess that's my goals. I'm going to stick those out till I get that. Maybe keep going if it's going well, but I have a hunch I'll hit a hard wall based on the fact that I'm technically not very good. They are a relatively low skill way to work on explosive strength, which is a relatively helpful quality to have for strongman. But I usually prefer to use bag throwing or just regular plyos to address that. And that's something that's always come really easily to me. I've always been an explosive athlete. Just lifting weights and trying to move my warm-ups quickly made me even more explosive. It's definitely one of my genetic strong suits. So I don't need to dedicate a tremendous amount of time to training it. Just moving my static strength training fast tends to keep me pretty quick. Then doing a little bit of jumping or a little bit of throwing, kind of top that off. I'm always one of the quicker guys at every show, even including the lighter weight classes. So normally I'd be working on my moving events here. Going to be getting a chain yoke and trying that out, just kind of see how I like it. Then we moved on to my loading, where we're using the stone of steel here. This is pretty light because this really smooth Titan stone of steel, as compared to the real Mike Bartos one, God damn, this thing is pretty slick. So the weights tend to be light, but it forces me to really work on kind of pulling that weight into me. And it's translated so far to full Atlas stones with tacky with a lot more weight. That being said, it's definitely a deviation away from optimal. If you want to get good at lifting real Atlas stones, you lift real Atlas stones. That being said, picking up a sphere and loading it makes you better at picking up spheres and loading it. So it's a lot better than doing nothing. And so far, it has prepared me for the real stones and shows, although eventually I will have to get my shit together, get the molds, and get a whole set of Atlas stones to train these properly with tacky. But in the off season, so far, this has worked for me. Even though the weights are relatively light, mystery weight, I'm not telling you what it is, on these stone extensions for reps. It's translated well enough. And I just need to do these in the off season because it's just something I don't have enough lifetime reps under my belt on. I was making a little bit of a technical error on these and pulling in with the hands a little bit too much and not kind of squeezing with the forearms. I was over reliant on the hand pressure. Need to also get better contact with my forearms, and my biceps took a bit of a beating due to that error. By the end, I started fixing it up, obviously, but biceps were quite sore, a little bit tweaky, didn't feel great. So when I moved on to my curls, which I'm kind of doing as stone assistance work, and also it's a way to get myself to do some curls so I can have big arms, because I've always wanted big arms. I just haven't wanted them enough to bother to do direct bicep training. Not because I think, oh, bicep isolation is for sissies or something. I think it makes sense. You know, you get the cred for being a big, strong guy. You get to be jacked if you got big arms. That's the most logical way to get big arms, is directly training them. But that being said, I just find it really boring, and historically, it hasn't translated to my training endeavors. Right now, I do feel like they're lagging behind a little bit on some of my loading type stuff, so I'm doing them as a little bit of a loading assistance movement. Normally, I do one plate and some change here, but my biceps were feeling so thrashed and tweaky from doing those stones wrong. Just throwing a 25 on each side was weirdly hard. That was quite the hit to the ego, but I'll take it. Biceps are going to be a little bit sore tomorrow, which is good. Hopefully that means if I go home and I eat my protein and I sleep, I will become bigger and stronger. Outside of that, just finishing up also with some palms down curls. I like to do a little bit of palms down work, whether it's reverse grip triceps or reverse grip biceps, because it's a good way to take care of my wrists. I have relatively below average wrist size, which is so funny because you see people say that's like some massive predictor of whether you have good strength genetics or not, is whether your wrist size is good. And my wrists are below average, and clearly my strength genetics are doing just fine. So I don't necessarily know how much weight I put behind that as a proxy. I just have to do a little bit of homework to keep them healthy, as compared to Max, who's got big old monster joints. I need to do some seated calf raises to keep my ankles healthy, and I need to do a little bit of either wrist extensor work or a little bit of reverse grip work on my triceps or my biceps to keep my wrists healthy. But if I do my homework, they hold up quite well. Hasn't held me back yet. So this is kind of my event session, which is going to stay in there through the whole deadlift peaking cycle, because I got to work on these things. I got to compete more often. I got to become more of a well-rounded athlete, in addition to chasing down my static strength goals that I'm quite passionate about. Finished up with grip here. These are some of my favorite grip exercises. So this is the kind of sideways Ed Cone rack hold. The reason I really like these is because the bar is trying to roll your hand open the same way it does on a double overhand deadlift. It's kind of like how holding on to a dumbbell is very difficult, but that same weight on a farmer's handle feels relatively easy because the dumbbell is trying to roll your fingers open. The farmer's handle pulls straight down. It's also the same reason we can hold on to more mixed grip, is by having the hands facing in opposite directions. It kind of negates that tendency for roll, and we can hold on to more weight. But that being said, when we're trying to train the grip, leveraging things that try to roll our hand open is a phenomenal way to get the hand stronger. So I like these sideways rack holds. I like hangs from a bar where it's across the catches up high or on top of the rack, so the bar can rotate freely. That way, again, it's trying to roll your hand open. You don't have this big axial loading that you do with heavy holds. It's very low back friendly for something you could take really heavy because it's a hang. Really, really like those. These are probably my two favorites. I really like doing double overhand shrugs with no straps, either with or without my thumbs, a la Andy Bolton, just because sometimes it's nice to count reps instead of count time. I'd say those are my favorite three. Obviously, farmers are good. And the other one I like to do is a little bit of pinch grip work. Grip is specific. You want to get good at holding onto a bar, hold onto a bar. That's why my favorite grip routine is just adding a 5-count hold to the last rep of every working set of deadlifts for all my power lifters. But that being said, I find a little bit of pinch grip is helpful for getting the thumb strong to lock in the other side of that grip.